The Inside Scoop with Alex and Jeff.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Inside Scoop with Alex and Jeff. I'm Alex Dingman.
I'm Jeff Doss. Let's do this, guys. Thank you guys for joining us. This is week 3 of lightweight week. See, here we go again. Lightweight month. And before we get into introducing our special guests, we want to let you guys know that we are part of the Martial Arts Center Network, and we are also sponsored by the Virtual Fight Tour. We have Virtual Fight Tour 6 coming up this weekend, February 20th. It's going to be awesome. So many up-and-coming talent, people that maybe you haven't gotten to see. You get to see continuous fighting, jiu-jitsu, point fighting, team fighting, females, male, juniors, adults, seniors. It's going to be great. So make sure you guys go to myeventtex.com and look up Virtual Fight Tour 6 and join us all while we enjoy this great sport karate event. So
yeah, I'm excited about that one. That one's going to be a fun one. We'll get into the details of that later.
Yeah.
But now,
yes, sir.
We have our guest. Go ahead, Jeff. I'll let you. You guys have a great relationship with each other, so I'm gonna let you do the introduction. You'll be better at that than I will.
So, one of my favorite kickers of all time. One of the best fighters from the 80s and 90s, and someone who has motivated so many people and been a great mentor, teacher, and coach to a lot of people from the DMV to all over the East Coast. A great sport karate fighting legend, Ibby Abdalla. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Jeff.
So let's get into it. Let's just explain to everybody where you're from and how you got into martial arts.
I started martial arts when I was 7 years old in Washington, D.C. I needed to do something after school, something productive.
Yes, sir.
So I joined a martial arts school. I was a school called D.C. Dragons in D.C., right off of 18th Street in Adams Morgan. And my instructor was Robert McDuffie, who studied under June Rhee. Okay. And I started at a camp, a karate camp that they had there, and loved the camp and joined the school at the age of 7. So I've been training ever since.
Awesome.
Now, what time was that? Like, what year-ish was then? That
was 1971.
All right. So when you said your instructor was one of June Rhee's students, I mean, if it wasn't the June Rhee Taekwondo Institute, it had to be down the road from it.
Right. June Rhee had a school on, I think it was M Street or L Street. And my instructor was one of the first to break away from June Rhee and open up his own school.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. So. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So
awesome.
Real quick on that, because I was really curious about that. Was that kind of encouraged, celebrated, or was that frowned upon?
Of course, it was frowned upon.
Okay.
And this is we're talking about the early 70s.
Yeah.
But my instructor decided that he wanted to do his own thing, have his own school. And there weren't too many people who did that back then. And Robert McDuffie was the only one who did. And I don't know what their relationship was. I know it wasn't a bad relationship because he was still able to go to his tournaments and support him. And I know that Jeff Smith had a relationship with my instructor too. So I don't think it was too bad, but that is something, you're right, Alex, it's something that you didn't do back then.
Yeah, it's kind of frowned. It's weird. Like you see some where it's kind of like, I don't want to say encouraged, like, yeah, get out of here, because that's never the case. But like supported, I should use the word supported or frowned upon. That would probably be the better way to put it. So it still happens to this day where it's kind of one or the other. But yeah, I get it. I get what you.
Oh, you froze on me. Yep.
But let's get into you.
Yes,
Forget
let's talk about
that.
you. So what happened? When did you first start competing, and or when? Sorry.
Well, I started at the camp. It was a summer camp, and as a matter of fact, I had 3 days to start studying and practicing on a form. And I learned the form, and I competed with the form at the end of the summer camp session. So my first tournament was actually like 10 days after I first started. And,
wow.
nice.
And
I competed in forms. I learned my form. I won first place. I was happy with that. So I was hooked from there.
Wow,
yeah.
That's so cool. Now, as you competed as a junior and all the way up into adults, right? Where was that transition to where you felt like, okay, I'm going to start taking this serious? Where I love this. When was that? Because all of us have that moment where we're like, all right, this is what I want to do. Well,
from that tournament on, there were a lot of tournaments in the DC area.
Yeah,
there was a black belt, a master instructor by the name of Jimmy Roberts, who had a tournament.
Okay.
In Virginia. You probably have heard of him.
I've heard the name.
Master Roberts had a tournament. I competed as a mini Pee-wee in his tournaments. Then Francisco Esteban Condi had tournaments really almost monthly out in Baltimore. That's where I did most of my local competing. And then Robert Everhart had a great tournament in DC, along with Dennis Brown, who had a great tournament in DC. My instructor had a good tournament. Robert McDuffie had a great tournament in DC. So it was a lot of activity. Yeah. So I competed a lot from the time I was 7 years old. So I got a lot of exposure in the area. I was known as one of the top competitors in the area, and I was the youngest black belt in the area at the time. I got my black belt at 12. Okay. So I would go to tournaments and I would go to the black belt meetings, and they kicked me out because I was too young. So it was that kind of thing. But
I've been there.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
I remember that.
You had a lot there that was really loaded that you just mentioned. So you were saying like you competed a lot, like you black belt at 12. Right. Yeah. They kicked you out of black belt meetings. Sounds like, Jeff, you were doing the same. When you say you competed like a lot, you were competing all the time. How often would you say there was a competition that you were performing in or competing in?
It's a good question. I competed almost monthly because in DC there was in the DMV area there were so many tournaments. Virginia had a lot of tournaments. Maryland had a lot of tournaments. DC had a lot of tournaments. So monthly, I was going to tournaments. Yeah,
and that's just in your area.
Yeah, Condi alone had tournaments every month, just about. So we stayed busy. Yeah, we stayed busy. and Master Condi, let me tell you something about Baltimore. Baltimore had the hardest tournaments. They had the best black belts back then. I mean, there were some great black belts in the Baltimore area back then. And DC had some great fighters too. We had some great schools. June Reed didn't really compete outside of his June Reed tournament. Right. But you had there was Simba Dojang. They were a strong school in the DC area that we competed with a lot. But there were so many schools, and Dennis Brown had a great kung fu school. Mm-hmm. And it was a great mix because we had, not only did we have Taekwondo, but we had Shotokan, we had Kung Fu, we had, a great mix of styles at the time too.
Yeah. And that's all like, so a tournament every month within 30 minutes to an hour of you pretty much. Yes. Right. And I mean, that's what's really cool about that. Like when you think about that, so many tournaments without having to leave, your area. Right.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's what's amazing about it at that time. And also just the DC Baltimore area, man. I mean, explain about what it was like growing up there and the different people that kind of helped you get to where you became a national level fighter. Because it's nuts.
Well, we had a great school. There was a lot of talent in our school.
Okay.
In DC Dragons, a lot of talent. a lot of talent in our area.
Yeah.
And the guys from Baltimore, just, I would compete in junior division, and then I'd sit back, as you want to watch the adults fight at the end, right? So I'd sit back in the tournaments. And back then, tournaments would run until midnight all the time.
Okay.
They weren't run, like diamonds. I mean, they would run like Diamond Nationals. I mean, it wasn't over at 2:00. It may have been over at 2:00 in the morning, but I would be waiting around watching the black belts fight, and those guys would throw down. I mean, they had some fighters back then, kickers, punchers, and I learned from watching them. I was a big fan of the fighters in the area. We had Leroy Taylor, we had Henry Grant, we had so many. There was a guy by the name of Kevin Palmer Mush, who was from Simba Dojang. There were so many great fighters that, and the Watkins brothers, guys had Bush that was out like this, and he would be fighting, and his Bush would be bouncing. You couldn't even concentrate on the match, He was so busy watching his Bush bounce. And he was the number one fighter. I remember his name was Kevin Watkins at the time, and he was a bad dude. Great reverse punch, Shotokan fighter. So I learned from watching so many different fighters.
Yeah.
But what got me out to the circuit, Nasty did a seminar once.
Okay.
And he came by in the area and did a seminar. I was teaching at the time for Rodney Batiste, who was with June Ree, and he was a full contact fighter and lost the world title fight to Johnny Theriot. He and Theriot were the best middleweights at the time. So I was working with him, and Nasty Anderson was in town and did a seminar. So he saw me in a tournament, local tournament, and we talked a little bit at that local tournament. But because I won the amateur division, he won the professional division. He told me I should move the amateur division, but at the time I was thinking about going and fighting in the Olympics. And they were saying, man, you couldn't fight in the Olympics if you were getting money. So I didn't want to get money yet. So I wanted to maintain my amateur status. So Nasty and I had a nice talk. He and I won on the same technique. I did a spin hook kick to win my division, and he did a spin hook kick and won his division off of it. So we kind of chuckled about that. Later we met at the seminar, and he talked. He was encouraging me, but I didn't get out on the circuit until I won what's his name's tournament, Robert Everhart's tournament.
Okay.
He had a tournament where you win his tournament, then you get to go to Bermuda.
So I heard a lot about this.
Yeah, I won his tournament, and then that got me out. So I went to Bermuda, and I competed against all the top fighters. So that's what got me out.
And what year was that? 81, 82, or later, or what?
87.
Okay, all right. So you were all right. So when did you start competing in the adult division? Because we've heard a lot of different stories about. Did you wait until you were? Did they make you till you're 18, or were you competing younger?
I think I started when I was like 17. The first tournament I won, adult division, I remember we didn't even wear gear back then. We hardly wore gear back then. I was like 16, 17, and I went in Roberts. James Roberts had a tournament, and I fought against someone who would Ron Jenkins, who would become my coach.
Yeah.
I fought against him in that tournament. So I was the first one that I won grand champion in. I was like 16, 17. Yeah.
Awesome. So once you got to Bermuda, what was that experience like? Like going to seeing all those fighters, and then even just seeing that, hey, I have a chance. I'm like, what made you want to keep going? Because some people, they go to that big event and you don't see them anymore, or they may become the one more event after it.
I won the Bermuda trip by fighting against Kevin Thompson at tournament in DC. So I fought Kevin Thompson. I won the grand champion there. So then when I went to Bermuda, I had already fought Kevin, and I already met Nasty. So I wasn't really too starstruck.
Right.
You battle KA. You're not going to be I mean, that's pretty much. It's not going to get much more intense than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I saw Billy Blanks fight for the first time. I was like, oh, this is some serious stuff. But yeah. So what I weighed in light. I don't know why, but I was like 145 or something like that. Usually I'm in the 150 range. So I fought super lightweight. KA fought lightweight. So I fought Tony Young, and that was the first time I had fought Tony Young. So I fought in that division. So I won that division. Then I fought Kevin Thompson.
Oh, wait, time out. You just glassed over something. You just said like, oh, I was super light, KA was light, Tony Young was in super light, so I won that division. You just glossed over the fact that you just beat Tony Young first time you're going into adults.
Yeah, well, I was already in adults, but there was the first time I was out on the circuit.
Yeah.
So when I fought in Baltimore, I fought adults when I was first. I won the first adult tournament I had was in DC. Then I fought in Baltimore a lot. And
so you've been doing this a little bit as the adult.
It wasn't like it was my first tournament.
Was that your first time fighting Tony Young?
It was my first time out on the circuit.
Yeah.
Because I fought a lot of local tournaments.
Local stuff,
so
yeah.
I was a good local fighter, but I hadn't been out on the circuit yet.
Right.
You weren't one of those guys yet.
Right. I wasn't a name fighter. I wasn't, I mean, I was known locally, but
you were a really good local talent. That was
Nasty inspired me though. Nasty said, "Man, you're one of the best fighters out there. You should get out there and compete." And he said, "You're a bum though." Nasty called me a bum, so it kind of got me motivated to get out and improve myself. As a competitor, you got to have that edge where you want to prove yourself. And I wanted to prove that I was, I wasn't a bum. I'm gonna get out there and throw down with everyone else,
That's right.
So when I was in Bermuda and I won first in my division, KA and I were throwing down again. He and I were just battling a lot throughout my career, and that's where I learned so much from fighting him. I gained so much confidence from fighting KA because he's such a powerful fighter,
Right.
So he's going to rub off. You fight somebody like that a lot, it's going to rub off. And there weren't too many people who were fighting as intense as KA was. So anyway, so then he and I were battling in Bermuda, and he won and went on to fight Billy. And I think that fight with he and I was so contentious. We were just at each other, just ripping at each other. So when he fought Billy, he was on a different level. He was pumped, and he scored like 8 unanswered points on Billy.
Wow.
Right. So and then Billy Blanks just cranked up and hit him. He was blitzing, and Billy just said, "Freak this! I'm just going to have to do something." Because KA was just amazing. He was moving well. His timing was great. So he got hit and he dropped. And that's the first time I've ever seen KA, drop. He and I had seen each other in tournaments before. I've seen him a couple of times, but that's the first time I've ever seen him get, dropped. So when he dropped KA after that, he was a little bit hesitant to blitz and all that. So he's kind of moving around a lot. And he kept going out of bounds against Billy. And Billy was racking up points because KA was going out of bounds. So I was, and I was thinking, you know what? If I would have been 1 or 2 points ahead of KA, I would have been fighting Billy Blanks that day. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I better train. I'd better be ready. Because, in any tournament, I could be fighting one of the top fighters in the country. KA was already one of the top fighters, but I mean, guys who are like, a heavyweight top fighter, So I got to training when I got back home, and that's what motivated me. After seeing the best fighters, I saw Richard Plowden hit Nasty with a back leg hook kick that was so inspiring. I mean, I was like, what? I mean, I was just so many things that weekend in Bermuda. You see the best fighters in the world, and it inspired me. Mafia, I saw Mafia the first time do his thing. I was like, man, that's Mafia Holloway. Okay, all right, okay. So I went home and did some extra training. And so that's where I just started to build just off of that.
Awesome. Wow.
Now,
I know.
That was huge. There was a lot loaded into that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One of the things that that I was just going against someone who's intense, right? And how that took you to the next level, like a Kevin Thompson, like Billy Blanks, because he was the same, he was going to hit you hard,
right, and fast.
Yeah, and fat. Oh, yeah, and just one of the most athletic fighters we've ever had, really.
Right.
And just that importance of going against that level of competition, not just good talent, but intense, right? Intensity. Right. And I think that's something that many people need to find to get themselves to the next level is go after that person who's going to push you, right?
Exactly. I was just looking at a video, just to make it real short though, of a guy who studies Aikido, and he was saying that his Aikido black belt didn't mean anything because he's going against somebody who was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and the guy, his Aikido techniques didn't work. And later he just figured that, well, it's because in Aikido, your partner learns to go with your blow, right? So it's not really full contact and, as you said, intense,
right?
Okay, but when you're going against somebody who's doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that's intense from start to finish. So he said it took him years now to develop, after training with somebody who was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, took him years to develop that kind of a game where it didn't matter if he was grappling, he'd be able to choke someone out if he wanted to. So it was interesting to hear that. But you definitely have to go against somebody who's going to push you, and it's got to be, because a lot of people say point fighting is just tapping. And really, when you get up and fight black belt and you only have on a pair of, little gloves, and you're swinging and hitting, you're hitting each other, and you're fighting somebody who's, not just hitting, but will hit you after the break, hit you hard. It's not just a little tap, you're fighting, so you learn from that. And I did some full contact too, which helped me. Okay. And that helped me become a better point fighter because I wasn't afraid to get out and deliver, So that took my game up a bit too. So you do have to train with intensity, and you have to have you have to get used to competing and fighting with somebody who's going to push you. Exactly.
Awesome. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ibby, you mentioned a few things. So you mentioned like when you saw all the guys that you potentially could be fighting, like, hey, if I had 2 more points, I would have been fighting Billy. Right. I got to go train. When you looked at that, did you know, like, what did you do different when you said, like, I got to go train? Did you address one area, or were you able to introspectively look at yourself and say, listen, I'm the bomb.com when it comes to kicking. However, this thing I got to address. Or did you know what to do, or did you just work harder?
Good question. Because Jerry Fontenez and I would talk, and he would tell me how, back then we were just fighting. And we were just
Jerry Fontenez just talk.
So. It wasn't like it was a strategy. Of course, you did have one, but back then you would just go, and especially with point fighting, because point fighting is the one who hits first, right? Mm-hmm. But then after you mentioned you had a good question, because when I got back home, I thought, okay, Billy does this. I already knew Nasty did that. Okay, I already knew from watching him what their strengths were. Okay. And I already knew from fighting KA what his strength was. Okay, now how do I stop the Blitz with a kick? Because I'm a kicker. I think kick first. I was a Taekwondo artist. How do I stop the kick first? How do I stop, what do I do against their strong techniques? How do I counter that with a kick? So I would drill on a pole. I get on a pole, because I didn't have a bag, but I did have a pole in the middle of my school. And I would just boom, boom, throw defensive techniques, imagining someone coming at me. And I knew I had to train, intensely, because they were coming at me with speed that I'd never seen before. So I would just drill defensive techniques as well as offensive techniques, because I had a pretty good kicking game offensively, but I had to develop a defense. Right. So that's what I did. And so because of that, and through visualization and training hard on targets on a pole like that, that lifted my game too. So then I said, okay, now I know what I'm going to do on defense. So if they blitz me or if they do this particular technique, I've got an answer for it. So that's what brought my skill level a little bit higher, because I had to learn how to do defensive kicks against their strengths.
Nice. Awesome.
That's why I was pretty good. I think as a lightweight, I was one of the better. I had better percentages against heavier weights. I was one of the first lightweights to beat Nasty Anderson, and I beat Billy Blanks. Actually, I fought all the top heavyweights of my era, and I beat all the top heavyweights except for Anthony Price. He and I fought once in a team match. It was close, but Anthony's a monster.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anthony Price is a
Yes,
monster.
literally, yes.
Yeah.
No, and that's a great point that you made too. Is just because we have talked to a lot of lightweights, and we're going to talk to several more. But like you said, you had a way to go against those heavier weights, and that was something that still people to this day say, the lightweights don't have a chance, and that's, I mean, we've talked about it before. It's like, they don't have a chance, so we're just going to separate it, So now there's a lightweight grand and a heavyweight grand. But now there's an open weight division as well. So it's kind of like 3 overalls really in some way. But, because of that. But, I mean, growing up, to me, it was always, Ibby has a chance to win it all. Pedro has a chance to win it all. These guys can win it all,
Right.
So, I mean, even years ago, I mean, I don't know. Keith Vitelli was not a very heavy fighter, but he was the number 1 ranked fighter for a long time.
Yeah. He was a great middleweight, light heavyweight. Keith Vitelli, great kicker.
But I mean, they're just lighter guys that could win.
You mentioned Keith Vitelli. When I first started, I had to go with Joey Shiflett, who was a Keith Vitelli student, trained with Keith Vitelli. And Joey, it was Joey and KA. Those are the ones that I had to, when I really started hitting the circuit. They're the ones I had to get over. And I knew if I could get through them, if I fought heavyweights, see, the reason why Pedro, Ronald, and myself were able to beat heavyweights is because we had great defensive sidekicks. So against heavyweights who would always blitz or throw reverse punches, as soon as they leaned in, we caught them with sidekicks. So that's why we did so well against heavier weights.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we see that now with someone like Jack Felton, amazing defensive sidekick, other great fighters as well. I mean, the defensive sidekick has turned into the move for a while, you know what I mean? It was the defensive sidekick and the body reverse punch in these past 20 years. But when you were competing, there was a lot of well-rounded, techniques, a lot more techniques were going on. Do you think that we could see more of that? In the sport that we have right now?
Well, what happened when they had to have the mat down for insurance purposes, when they had the mat down at tournaments, it took away the kicking game somewhat because it's harder to push off on a mat and kick.
What kind of mats were you guys
have
using?
to push off, and it's like running on the beach, right? So it's like you're in. You have
a
to
little
come
bit
out
of
of the
cushion.
hole. Yeah, it's harder to kick. Kick when you're on a mat. So what happened was a lot of the kickers hurt their knees, like me. I got a knee injury. Mafia got a knee injury. I think even Ronald got a knee injury. I think Pedro even probably got a knee or hip injury. And over time, if you're throwing a lot of kicks because of the mat, you got injured. So the mat kind of took away from those being able to kick. So you see a lot of people throwing a lot of blitzes. You can blitz because you're on 2 legs. You're not pushing off with 1 leg.
Right.
You still have that factor. You could hurt yourself, but not like when you're kicking, So that's why today the game is a little bit, it's more narrow, whereas before it was wide open. We were fighting on a carpet. We were fighting on wood. We were fighting on concrete. So we can push off and just throw whatever we wanted, It was like fighting in the studio. But, when, you can't do those kind of kicks on a mat.
Wow.
What kind of mats were you guys using? It sounds like maybe it was like a wrestling mat.
No, I mean, the mats that they have nowadays, the mats, the 1-inch mats or whatever they have in tournaments that they have to have.
Yeah.
See, we didn't have mats. We didn't have mats when I was competing. It was just wood. We would compete on, high school gyms. We could compete in maybe the coliseums where it was wood floor, or we would compete in hotel ballrooms where it's carpet.
Hotel ballroom carpet. That's all right.
Yeah.
You could push off. I love fighting on carpet. You could push off and just go and throw down. But
bring it. Yes.
When you're fighting on a mat, it's like you can't. It's not the same. You can't push off. It's not the same kind of push.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the first tournament I remember really having mats was Battle of Atlanta, and it was probably like 97 or 98. But they were even trying to have like the Swain mats and the zebra mats, and they were like separating throughout the whole thing. It wasn't working well. Then the puzzle mats kind of came about after that, and people started getting more of that. But yeah, it was more of the carpet, or even like Compete Nationals would have like just cut out strips of carpet and then put it down as a ring in each one on top of the concrete.
Right.
They would do that for years.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Okay.
It's great because, of course, because there were so many people who would fall back and hit their head and hurt their head or something,
their hips.
It's just that you have to adapt and hold a different stance as a kicker. And that will make the puncher favored, because then they have an advantage because you almost have to have your feet together to kick. They have their feet wide apart, so they'll run over you before you can, get off and throw your kicks. Yep. So it just made it the punchers, the blitzers, the good blitzers had an advantage because of the mats.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. I haven't really heard it like that before.
Yeah, I think you're right on with that, and it also gives the puncher a little bit of an advantage because when the kicker's stance narrows and comes in, they're not able to adjust and move very easily as well.
No, not at all.
That's right. And you can get jammed so much easier when you start with your feet closer together. See, if you have your feet
negative flashbacks as you're saying this.
When you have your feet wide apart and then you try to lift up, there's so much, strain on your supporting leg to get there, So you can injure yourself, injure your knee, injure your hip. So unfortunately.
I got a question. You've kind of dabbled into a little bit of what it was like, what it wasn't, lightweights beating heavyweights. You didn't really do that a lot. You got a chance to do that a little bit. So I didn't really get a chance to see you fight live very much. And remember, ever since I really started karate in 92, I paid attention to as much as I could. But I didn't. You won the diamond ring in 91. Never have I seen that. And I've seen a lot of tapes of that tournament. I have not seen that one. Who did you have to go through in that ring?
That was Mike Bernardo was in my ring. He and I fought for first. I fought for grand champion. I fought against Steve Boyles, who was one of the top June Reese students who was trained by Jeff Smith. I fought Steve Boyles for the overall grand champion that day, who was a heavyweight. And he was all muscle. Mm-hmm. But what had happened following that tournament in 91, I went to a local tournament because I wanted to try to get some extra cash because I was going to go to represent the U.S. in Russia. And I went against Gerald Dawson. Now, I was fighting Gerald Dawson for grand champion, and I did a side kick on his shoulder, and my leg popped, and I broke my knee. So I broke my knee right after, it was about a month after I won the diamond. So I broke my leg then. So that's why, from that point on, everything I did after 91, I was real calculated. I have to be real careful. I didn't go in. I never got surgery. But I was really fighting on one leg from that point on.
Wow. Okay.
So you really have had like two different styles of your fighting, and that was the dividing point.
Yes.
Wow.
I could always punch too, because I like to kick and then blitz after I kick.
Right.
But, at that point, I was just lifting my leg as a decoy, just relying on a reputation. But I wasn't really throwing much with my leg because I couldn't really connect too much with my kicking leg because that's the one I broke. But I could at least close the gap a little bit and fake a kick. But my game was different. I didn't have the explosiveness. I didn't have the open field. I just had to keep it narrow at that point on. I'd love to compete, but I was limited at that point.
Wow. Okay, man.
So you mentioned Gerald Dawson, who you mentioned a couple of guys who now have, passed on. early. We'll say early, and Gerald's one of them. Rest in peace. So he's from the DMV area as well, right? So is his family.
Baltimore.
Did you get a chance to train with?
He was born in New York, and he's and he trained in Baltimore, and he and I trained together. We were on the same team for a while.
Okay.
Good friend of mine, love the man. And great thing about Gerald was he's probably the heaviest fighter on the circuit, but moved like a super lightweight.
Yeah.
He had the quickest back fist. He would surprise all kinds of people who didn't know better. I remember when he was fighting Pedro in New York once, and Pedro was up on Pedro. He jumped up on Pedro like 8-0.
Stop.
So we just got up and left. We just figured, Gerald's got this. Pedro came back in the second round because they fought 2 rounds and won, typical Pedro style. But you can't sleep. You could not sleep on Gerald. Because Gerald, I mean, people who knew, because he was even like 1 or 2 points with Raymond Daniels. They were throwing down. Well, they were like, tight.
That wasn't too long ago.
Like, it could have gone either way.
Yeah.
So because he had the reach, he had the speed, he was smart too. He was very smart. Gerald and I would talk a lot. He would talk about how he played football in high school, and he'd tell me, I didn't really care much about the hitting and stuff. I like the technique on the line. He would tell me about how he would block this way, push somebody over a certain way, use certain martial arts techniques to get somebody out of the way. He was very, and he would talk to me about things in life, things that I still think about, to this day. Because he's a very bright man.
Oh yeah,
Real Dawson.
Definitely. Yeah, I love talking to him as well. I mean, just the phone calls and the advice, business advice, asking, promoting advice, back and forth, going back, fighting, mindset on, why do you train this way, but when you go to the tournament, you don't look this way. Things like that, man, that he would always bring up. And so, definitely. Alex, what was one of the questions you were going to ask?
Heart of a Lion.
Oh, yeah, Heart of a Lion, definitely.
Well, one of the other questions I was going to ask is we've talked a lot, like you mentioned quite a bit about defense.
Yes.
Have you been paying attention to a lot of the point fighting of today? Are you kind of up on seeing what some of the guys are doing?
Yes.
Okay.
And when I watch them today, and I see that they have good techniques. Like there was this one fighter from Connecticut. What's his name? Awesome fighter.
Connecticut, probably Bailey Murphy.
Bailey Murphy.
Yeah, he's winning everything. And I would tell him the little thing like, look, after you do your techniques, because he's just phenomenal, cover up. Little things like that, because he'd be phenomenal. He hit people and then he would just turn. And back in our day, you fight somebody like Jay Bell, somebody like, you better not turn your back, because it's still on until the referee says break, right? And he's so fast that he'll hit somebody and he'll stop. He knows he scored and he'll turn. The ref won't say anything, and the other guy can just hit him late. So I had to say something to him, hey, just make sure you're protected. Go back with your hands up. Keep it, things like stick your defensive side kicks against other fighters I've seen. Because I see them throw it, but they don't stick it. So it's not to the point where you can even see it. Because it's just pop, it's a slap. It's not and we used to throw it like a stick, where you wham, and you hit somebody like Pedro. It's funny. If you watch Pedro film, watch how when he hit somebody with a side kick, boom, they would just stand there and kind of bounce. Yeah. I mean, they would stop.
Yeah, they would stop.
The other thing people didn't know about Pedro had legs like a tree trunk. His legs were like, he had some strong legs, right?
Right.
So he was powerful with the side kicks. So, but people aren't sticking their side kicks. So, I like watching people today, watching fighters today. You're always going to have great, like, what's his name? Great kicker today?
Let's see. There's several of them.
There's a ton.
I think you're even going to interview.
Oh, we did an interview with him?
You're either going to or you did.
I'm thinking Justin Ortiz.
There you go, Ortiz. I love watching him fight, He'll throw a round kick to the head, and then he'll drop a side kick to the body. Nice.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I like seeing, different things that, fighters are doing.
Justin is a 90s style fighter stuck in 2020.
I'm sorry?
Justin is a 90s style fighter living in 2020.
Yeah.
2021.
Yes.
Sorry. 2021.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. He has that same style. And he comes from up north as well. So, used to with the Boston Taekwondo style, type thing. So,
yeah.
So
He
here's
reminds
what
me
I
of
wanted to get
a
at.
lot of different fighters. But he's got his own style that's really nice. And he's one of the guys who can kick from a wider stance.
Correct.
So he kind of reminds me of Pedro in a sense, although Pedro used to start in a wide stance and kind of jump and put his feet together before throwing. But Ortiz can maintain a wider stance and kid off. He has to have strong legs.
Oh yeah.
Because especially on a mat too. But he's not going to be doing that for long. So sometimes those joints are going to give out on him. But so but yeah, it's wonderful to watch. Watch him fight, and really watching Raymond fight. He's got the best spins of all time. Raymond's got great hands.
Yes, he does.
And he doesn't have a front leg that's amazing. He can use it because he uses his side kick. I've seen him use his side kick a lot like how I used to use my side kick. He used to do that in full contact. Really at it. But his spins are ridiculous.
Yeah, they're crazy.
His check spin side kick, unbelievable. Knocks people out. His check spin hook kick is a 360 round kick, unbelievable. Spin hook kick. His spin side kick. His spins are phenomenal. Just the best ever.
I've eaten both of them before.
Probably the best fighter, ever. But his spins are ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. I'm watching him. I'm going, what the heck? To somebody that tall, and that fast, and knows how to spin.
Yeah.
Because when you're spinning, you have so much power. You have so much more power when you spin with a technique. So very impressed with his spin.
So, Ibby, I got this question because this question came up on the CTE earlier this week. And
the other
podcast.
This
was perfect timing to talk to you about it. Carlos Tierney brought up and he said, hey, what's up with the defense of today, which we kind of started talking about. And he says, I'm seeing, matches that are, 12 to 13 and the same time frame that we would fight a match that would end 4-6. And he's like, where's the defense? Where's the defense? So I was asking you, like, have you seen the guys today? Why do you think that's the case? I have an idea. I'm curious as to what you think.
People are blitzing crazy. They're just blitzing crazy. Okay, one of the best matches I've ever seen was Billy Blanks fighting against a fighter from Kevin Brewerton out of England. Kevin Brewerton from England, the same tournament I went to in Bermuda, fought Billy for a preliminary before Billy fought KA for Grand Championship.
Okay.
And they were blitzing each other silly. Billy had his league blitz. He had a California blitz, he's from England. And they were just racking up points. So then Billy just said, okay, I'm going to step back like he did the KA. I'm just going to step back and drill the guy. And knocked him out, actually. Drilled the guy, knocked him out, and then slowed him down from that point on. I think that everyone is blitzing these days, but they're not sticking with sidekicks because sidekicks aren't called. And sidekicks aren't called because people aren't sticking.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So if people would, and they're not throwing them the way we used to throw them in the 90s and the 80s and 70s. I would jump back and throw a sidekick. So by jumping back and throwing a sidekick against the blitz, you gave yourself more room to extend your leg. You would stop the fighter. Brady and Pedro would stop people standing up because their legs were shorter. If I would throw it, I would get jammed. So what I did was jump away and sidekick, give myself some distance.
Right.
Okay, so that's the difference. People aren't sticking sidekicks like they used to.
So I agree with you.
Instead of stopping them, they're getting points, 2 points for kicks. Everyone's blitzing.
Ibby, I agree with you, but I have another opinion as well. I think that's part of it. I think there's three parts to it. I think that's part of it. And I think the other part is that people are just stupid fast today. Like the speed today, it's really like
it's crazy.
Some of the fastest I've ever seen. Like just is that might not even get third place. are faster than like anybody else 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. All right. Now, here's the other part of it. We all will do whatever it is you tell us the rules are.
Yep.
You tell us, all right, this is what the rules are. This is how you got to fight. We'll do that. But the moment you start calling a back fist on the shoulder, I'm gonna hit that guy's shoulder. Yep. You let me do it, I'll do it.
Yep.
You let me throw a body punch and then back fist, and the punch hits the hip and the back fist hits the shoulder. And listen, I'll tell you the match. I'll even say who it was against. All right. It was at the U.S. Capitol Classics. I'm fighting Ibby Williams. And if he listens to the pod, I'm telling you, he knows this. All right. And he was livid, and I feel bad for you. All right. Ibby, because he was absolutely right. He threw a kick, and I went to counter and blitz, and my feet slipped, and I thought I was going to get hit, and I blitzed, and I hit his arm, and they gave me a point. Mm-hmm. And I thought, watch out. I'm just going to do this all day. I tried it one more time, and they gave me a point again, and I did it 8 more times, and I got 8 more points. And he's standing there losing his mind, and I'm like, I feel for you, but what the heck am I supposed to do? They're letting me do, like, why? It's not my fault. I'm not the one who's doing the bad thing. The ref, they're the ones doing the bad thing. And now, if you look at it across other sports, it's the same thing. You can't touch anybody in basketball anymore. You can't touch. James, I'm going to say another unpopular opinion. I don't think James Harden in basketball, I don't think he's that good. All right? When he leads the league in free throw attempts, if he has more free throw attempts than field goal attempts, and he's a leading scorer in the league, that's a problem. People aren't allowed to defend him. The refs aren't allowing you to do that. All right? It's just the same thing across. Even if you look at football, like, you're not allowed to touch a receiver. You're not allowed to touch them. All right? That's just like at all. All right? That's passing. So you're not allowed to play defense. So whatever the refs do, we have to cater to. Otherwise, we can't participate in the activity. Tell me, am I nuts? Tell me I'm nuts.
I agree with you.
Oh, man.
I agree with you. And because another thing, and on top of that, Harding will take the ball into people's chest. When he's driving, he's not going to just drive like other people do. He goes right into somebody's chest to shoot a shot. When he's going to a layup, when he's driving to the basket, he'll go right into somebody's chest knowing that the ref's going to call a foul. I mean, he works the system.
Yep.
And as you said, you work the system to rack up points. KA is no slower than the fighters today. KA was sick fast. All right. He was crazy fast. So I had to make sure that I jumped away from him when I saw him flinch. So I was jumping away a lot of times I fought him, but I was ready whenever he did blitz. And people stop throwing side kicks because they're not getting called because they're getting jammed up. They don't know how to throw it right. They haven't figured to jump away because fighters are so fast. You got to fade away and just stick a side kick these days. Otherwise, forget it.
Baby, who's the fastest fighter you've ever fought?
The wonderful thing about lightweight division is that you're going to see some fast fights.
Correct.
Because almost everybody in that division is fast. KA, incredibly fast. First time I got hit with the Blitz was from KA. And he hit me, screamed, and I looked at him like, what the heck was that? What the heck was that? When at the Capitol Classic. Ronald Brady, fast dude. Okay? Pedro, fast. I mean, they had that this ridge hand thing that was just what the heck?
Oh, yeah.
But it was so fast.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, just whoom. Yeah, it was crazy.
All of them from Boston Taekwondo had that backwards ridge hand. Mafia would stop after the backwards because he didn't have to throw anything else. But all the other ones, they would throw the backwards ridge hand. They would drop that ridge hand. Pow, pow. It was just Tony Young. Talk about fast.
Super fast.
I mean, you, at the end of a match with Tony, he wouldn't hit you hard, but you would be like, what the heck? Randall Deloach, who was also a lightweight, who beat everybody on the Atlantic team tour one time, Bermuda. I think he won 2 of the championships. He's about the same height as Tony Young, but thick like Pedro, thick. That dude had a ridge hand that was so fast, it was crazy. He just beat everybody with it. He was fast. But I'd have to say,
Yes.
because really with speed and what fighters have learned today, I think, is in order for you to be quick, you have to have fast feet. Because if your feet move fast, your hands are going to be, going to move fast.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Kevin Thompson was a point guard in basketball. He knew how to move his feet well, and he had a quick blitz. His feet were so fast. So I'd have to really give it to KA in terms of speed, because he was explosive, and in order to be explosive, you got to be fast. He's going at you every time, and I saw him almost drop someone every tournament. I mean, that's how explosive he was. He was just dropping.
Right. Oh man. Now, Ibby, just name some of the teams that you were on, and just so some of our listeners, so they know, just and when you also, and after that, just like when you stopped kind of competing, like as far as at a not at a high, I don't mean at a high level, but like a consistent kind of basis.
Well, Force One was the first team I was on, Force One. Then after Force One, I think I was on.
Was it Prestige? Yep.
And then I was on Elite. That was so much fun. I think we were on the team together, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, we were.
I think on Prestige, that was fun because I got a chance to talk to Nikki Carlson. She was on that team. She was phenomenal.
That just seemed like a team full of badasses. I'm going to be straight honest.
What is that?
Team Prestige just seemed like a team full of badasses.
We weren't Metro, but we
well,
we weren't that bad. But we because Metro was pretty.
Well, they were unfair.
Bad. They were pretty ghetto, but we were all right. We had some good fighters that were some fighters. Okay. But yeah, I think that was the last one I was on. Was the one with Spud, because my knee was just bugging me every tournament. Every tournament, knee was bugging me. So I told him, I said, "Look, I love you, man. I love the team, but I just have to, I have to stop."
Yeah, it was so much fun. One. It was fun for me just being like a sport karate enthusiast and having a team where we had Tony Young, Anthony Price, Ibby Abdalla, and Terry Kramer like on the same team. And then we also had like Jotty Tension, Akin Williams, Jesse Ray, all these great fights. I mean, and there's more, but, and we could mix the teams up or do like, I think we even did like a Legends team and called it like the Legends team or whatever, like just fun stuff like that. It was really cool. Because again, you're talking about Legends that were all still at a high level, you, Anthony, Tony were all still winning your division. And, like Anthony made it to the finals of the Diamonds that year, in 97, and Tony won his division. And, it was just crazy.
Yeah.
That was cool. And then, you look at Prestige, you had fighters like Jay Bell, then you had this, it was kind of like the next level of Force One, because Hakeem and Shaw were on there as well, and other fighters. And those guys, you guys had a good 3-man team and 5-man team with them. You and the Austins and several other fighters that were on there. So,
and uniforms too. I like that. I like that black and teal.
Oh, the Prestige one.
So did I.
Yeah. That was cool. And those are all DMV, originated teams. So it was cool to see that. And just talk about that too, because I know we talked about growing up, but like for me, the DMV was like where all the top fighters were, but also where the top forms were. And it kind of seemed like it kind of took a step back in the late 90s and maybe 2000s. And so I know for me, that was a big deal, was to try to get that back, was to try to get that come up. Do you know why you think that maybe less people from that area start competing?
Well, I think Alex talked about it early. The first thing he said when he talked about, because when you separate from schools, you get watered down.
Mm-hmm.
And June Ree, I mean, with Charlie Lee and John Chung and all the great formed people that he had, then all of a sudden they kind of spread out. They had their own schools, so then you kind of lose the kind of you don't produce the same kind of students because everyone is kind of branched out. Everyone has their own ideas, and people start, instead of doing what works, they start trying, inventing other things. They want to try to teach things so if they break away from tradition and they start experimenting. So it's a little, it kind of, the talent kind of drops. I think that in our area, New York took over, Boston took over fighting wise. Then Raymond Daniels was phenomenal because here he was 140 pounds, but he was 6'3". So, that was crazy. How do you deal with that? And he was able to go through, just like world champion boxers who start in the bantamweight division. They gain over time as they get older, they gain more weight. He grew into his body and his build, and he was fighting, light heavyweight later on. But I think just because of the fact that so many of us kind of branched out, we had some pretty good talent in our area.
Yeah.
Hakeem, Shaw, and I, we had a 3-man team that did really good nationally.
That's one of my favorite teams.
Then we branched out. We kind of went our own ways. Hakeem and Shaw were doing things with real estate. So people get distracted with other things, but.
Yeah, and now the person carrying the banner for us is Cam Dawson for Maryland, and and he's the one person that I think does change everything that we've talked about. When people get hit by him, he makes sure they start putting their hands up after they blitz and things like that. So he's really trying to take it back. He's another 80s 90s style fighter, but is taking that into using that as his advantage, that style that maybe some people say, oh, that's old, that's not going to work these days. And he's shown that it can be effective.
Yeah, he uses I've seen him
people don't do
change and evolve, because he used to train with us when he was a kid.
Right.
Because Gerald and he would bring him to my school and we would all train together. And he would be fighting everybody. He would be like 8 years old. He'd jump in front of your face. Come on, let's fight. Let's fight. He didn't care. He was fighting everybody. And so he's going to have the best of the old, in a sense. Because he had that. He fought all of us when we were in our prime, back in the 90s. And he carried that on to the way people were fighting, today. So he's got his way. Plus his dad is brilliant. So he's got some, been told some great things.
Yeah. Awesome. Now, who is someone, because we've asked, I think, everyone on our show, especially this month, who is someone that you never got to fight that you wish you could have?
Well, there's some people I'd like to fight again, that's for sure.
Oh, all right.
But
and we can hear that too.
Jerry and I were great friends. We had like a cool connection. We never fought. And
okay, Jerry Connett,
right.
Yeah.
He's one of the people who were top fighter I never fought. And that, which is cool. And I'm not saying I want to fight him, but he's one person that would have been interested. He's an amazing fighter. But I fought everybody else pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fought everybody else.
Anybody these days, or maybe like in the 2000s era that you saw?
Well,
you were like,
healthy, I'd love to fight Raymond.
Okay.
He would teach me a lot about myself.
Yeah.
So I would love to fight Raymond. That's one person. Ross Levine, Dynamite, sharp, strong
That would have been a
fighter.
cool fight to see.
Would love to fight him too. He even told Gotti, he was like, I want to fight Ibby. Tell Ibby to come to you, or I want to fight him. So I know he was interested in training with me at one point. But yeah, those probably the ones.
Yeah.
Really,
I remember, I know you fought him several times, but still, I would love to see you in your prime fight Jason Borelli. I remember seeing you guys. I remember seeing you guys fight at 2001 Capital Classics, and just being like, "Oh man, this is awesome."
Yeah, I remember fighting him, and I was thinking, I knew what I got to do against him, right? Got in the ring with him, did my technique on him. He wasn't even there. I was like, what? That's when you know.
Yeah.
You know you're fighting a totally different type of fighter. Totally different type of fighter. So,
what was the technique?
You know what you want to do to somebody, right? Mike Tyson used to say, you know what you want to do till you get hit, but you know what you want to throw until the opponent's just not even there.
What was the one you were thinking?
He was a bad dude. He wasn't even there. I was like, what the heck?
Yeah.
See, he was somebody who was extremely athletic, was throwing anything I could throw better, could blitz like nasty if he wanted. But a phenomenal fighter. First time I fought him at DC, I was like, I couldn't even find him. Then the next time I fought him, I fought his dad, and then I fought him right after I fought his dad. It was funny. I fought Tankson, Larry Tankson. Then I had to fight, Jason Borelli, and that was in what was it, Kentucky?
Probably Kentucky.
Bluegrass.
Yeah,
that was in Bluegrass, and I was with him then. Second time I fought him, I was like, yes, we're on now. But but I learned from the first time. You can't. Okay, fighting him, you can't throw anything wide. And I think you asked me what was it that I missed him with, but it was a technique.
Yeah.
Well, I figured I saw him fight Mike Pombero.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Mike Pombero did a spin hook as soon as he lifted his leg, and it was just whoa, it was crazy. So I figured, okay, let me try that. I had a pretty good spin kick. I figured I had a pretty good spin kick. I hit nasty with 3 of them. So I have a pretty good spin kick. So he lifted his leg, I spun, and he was nowhere to be found. He was behind me. It was like he was kicking at me. And I said, okay, here we go. So I spun, and he was already behind me. So I figured this is ridiculous. This guy knows, what's up. He's got a serious game on him. So at that point on, my eyes were like this fighting him, So I was like, okay, well, we'll see.
Yeah.
But then after that, went home and I figured, okay, this is what you got to do against him. I made some adjustments. So I fought him a second time, and I made adjustments. If you watch that fight, we fought in Kentucky. I hit him with 3 back kicks, and the referee said, Ibby, man, stop kicking. Stop doing your back kick. You're hitting him in the groin every time. I was like, no, man. I was like, those kicks are there, And afterwards, he came up to me afterwards. He said, Ibby, man, you and Raymond, y'all are the only ones that can hit me with a spin back kick like that. And he told me that. He was so cool about it after the fight. I was like, oh, man, cool,
Yeah.
So, because stuff like that. Forget, okay, if you won, you won. You lost, you lost. But if your opponent comes up and they talk to you about it, they give you some, positive feedback afterwards. I respect the man, big time. So after that, I was like, man, thank you. All right, thanks for that. Because at least I knew I was hitting him.
Right.
The fact that he came up and he talked to me, he even told me, hey, man, hey, come here. That was good, man. So that was cool.
That's cool, man.
So before we wrap up, there's a couple. There's one thing, because we keep kind of dancing around this question a little bit. What's a move? Because you're kind of a little bit tied into what people are doing now. What's a move that people just really should just get around trying or throwing or attempting today that people used 30 years ago or more?
You're saying a move that people do today that is not effective?
No, what's something that people should be doing today that maybe we saw 30 years ago or more?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't want to dance around it. the blitzing that people are doing today is on a wide scale so much better than in our day. Because, you have people like Jody has seminars on footwork and how to blitz off footwork.
Mm-hmm.
You got people like Raymond teaching people how to blitz. Not really, but they watch him and they get inspired. But people are just blitzing so much these days. I wish, and really the kicking game has been taken away from us
Right.
as a sport.
Yeah.
Yes.
The kicking game, I would be telling people, hey, throw the pump side kick. If I was like an idiot and not knowing the fact that I understand why they can't do it. I understand. And so, because, if I was out in the circuit, I wouldn't be able to do it the way I was before. So I would just tell people to fade on the side kick. You're not fading on the side kick. That's something we did. And stick your side kicks, So that's what I would be telling people today. If I was a coach, I would take all the fighters that were on my team, and while I drill them on defensive side kicks, how to throw it. Jody had a great one where you sidestep and throw a hook kick to the face.
Mm-hmm.
I had a fade hook kick, but I know a lot of people can't do that. So, but a side kick, everyone could pretty much pick up on. So, I might show them how to do a cut kick like Raymond does, side kick, back kick to the face. I might show them how to, it's not that difficult. People think it's difficult, but it's not that difficult when you learn the timing of it.
Yeah.
But I would, to answer your question, I would say, look, throw that side kick. I remember before Brady fought me, he was up on stage, because I remember I fought Brady the first time he joined men's division. I fought Pedro the first time they joined men's division. And, they had to have that learning curve when they first started, just like I did when I had to fight K.A. and Joey Shiflett. But I saw Mafia pull Brady off. And I was watching him, and he said, look, man, just throw the side kick. just throw the side kick. So whenever I was fighting Brady and Pedro, if they beat me because they stopped me with a side kick, a good, strong side kick. So that's the one thing people need to do today is learn how to throw defensive side. And if they're flexible enough, like what's the guy we talked about? Great kick.
Justin Ortiz.
Like Ortiz, they can throw a hook kick, jump back and throw a hook kick. I would teach people how to jump away and throw techniques. But
nice.
you can't get off with front leg kicks anymore because people get jammed up. People get jammed. The blitzers are so good. Jody, you lift your leg up on Jody or Jesse Ray, forget it. They're going to jam you up. They're going to jam you up. All the great New York fighters, they will jam you up if you try to lift up a kick. So you got to learn, how to bait somebody with a blitz and then stick them. Yeah.
Awesome.
I think you're right about Jody's, because Jody's fingerprint on the sport and like Richard Plowden's fingerprint on the sport with being able to jam kickers, I think is very, very prominent. But I love your idea of the jump back. I would agree with that.
Yeah. That's definitely something I think people can start applying and trying and learning and reaching out to you about that. So that's going to be cool. All right. So we end our show every time. We want you to give your voicemail to the world. All right. And just tell people what you want them to know, and inspire some people.
Oh, I would just say now's the time. We're getting ready to come out of this whole thing. We'll be able to breathe again and compete again soon. So now's the time to hit the road, do your running, train. Of course, work your blitz, work your defensive side kick, but train intensely. And I don't know if you'll be able to get with somebody you can fight with, but if so, do some sparring, a lot of sparring, but train. Take advantage of the fact that we have a little bit of extra time. And then that also helps us from being stressed. So, yeah, train.
That's right. That's the answer to all the stress and the confinement is get out there and do what you love, right?
Yeah, that's right. get educated, study some fights, study fight tapes, and do some training.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
I'm loving it. Thanks for coming, man. This was a fun hang session. I tell you what, this was great.
Yeah, we got a lot of insight.
You guys had some great questions. Great questions. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Ibby, for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much.
This
has been another episode of Inside Scoop with Alex and Jeff. I'm Alex Dingman.
I'm Jeff Doss. See you guys next week.
All right. Thank you, guys.